Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pixilated Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Rife. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. If you are a regular listener, welcome back. The Pixilated Podcast is in season 3 right now. This is, I think, episode 10 or 11 or 12, something around there. And if you've been listening, you know that we tend to jump back and forth between two types of content. We do a lot of informational content where we're just talking about event engagement and tools and things you can do that are fun for your events. And then the other side of it is we focus on interviews with other people in either the events ecosystem or in industries that are adjacent to the events ecosystem, right? So not shy about talking to an AI expert who's working in Midjourney, but also we mainly speak with a lot of folks that fall under the hashtag event professional. And today is going to be no different. I'm excited to have a new guest on the Pixilated Podcast. We're going to be learning about his company, learning about kind of the evolution of it, where it started, maybe some of the highs and lows over the last three to 5 years, and also where they are headed now. So without further ado, Shaun Pierce, welcome to the Pixilated Podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity.
Definitely. Super thrilled to have you on here. Love that you're in Pittsburgh. Love that we're in Baltimore. We can leave that for later on. But Shaun, before we get into kind of the back and forth, why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit. You've been at this for a long time, so I know that this is going to be an awesome chat because you've got a lot of wisdom, and you're also running your own thing, and those two things can be very powerful when it gets into the back and forth. But before we go there, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about your company, about yourself, and how you ended up here?
Sure. Well, Pierce Events, we are an event planning, production, and management company. So we work with a wide variety of clients, corporate, social, and nonprofit. As you said, we're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we do events all across the country. And we've been in business for 15 years now. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary in 2023. So
congratulations.
So we do a wide variety of events. These days, the bulk of our business is kind of corporate focused. We're still doing, all different type of events, but kind of coming post pandemic, our focus has really been on working with a lot of companies in branding and marketing events and things of that nature.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Well, so, I see that, you spent time as a field marketer before you launched Pierce Events. And I'm guessing that some of your experience in that world led to you deciding to create your company. So if you don't mind, will you give us a little bit of that kind of origin story?
Sure. I call that my 15-year training period before I was ready to, kind of launch our own thing. And it's funny because I never really set out with the goal of, hey, I'm going into events. It's kind of that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I have no idea. So I'll do this for now. And that kind of lays out the path of life, I guess. But I will tell you, I have been very blessed throughout my life to be around incredible people and incredible moments. And I think you don't really realize it at the time, but they all influence every day after that. So at the age of 18, right out of high school, I was working concert production. We had a brand new outdoor venue that just opened right outside of Pittsburgh. And I was fortunate to get involved with that. So not only did I have a front row seat, but I also had a backstage pass to a lot of that, seeing, staging and lighting and sound production and working with the union crew and food and beverage and security and all those elements that go into a live production. And then right out of college, I ended up with a dream job with Walt Disney Studios. So I was doing field marketing for them. And our responsibility was to come up with kind of publicity and PR events, some marketing events for any Touchstone, Hollywood, or Walt Disney picture that was coming out during those times. So I think I learned more in 6 months with that company that a lot of people learn, in years. So, and then from there, I also got involved in media. So really by the age of 25, I guess, I had worked already in television, radio, motion pictures, and live concerts. So it was really a good foundation and, a good environment to learn a lot of that.
Awesome. So was there maybe I won't call it an aha moment because I think frequently it's actually based around a need that you're finding in your work that isn't being met in one place. What was the impetus for that transition to finally kind of step out and create Pierce?
I worked for different people for 15 years, and within 6 months, I lost my job. My mother lost her job, and my brother lost his job. And we were all kind of in different fields, but events had been at least a small part of all of what we were doing. And this was right around late 2007 going into 2008. So if you remember the economic conditions back then, I had a lot of contacts, made a lot of phone calls, and the answer was, "Hey, we would love to hire you," but it was just a time where people were losing jobs, not getting jobs. So you're really faced with the question: do you wait for things to change, or do you just try to make them change? And I guess I've always had in the back of my mind, oh, it would be cool to have your own company, be your own boss, do your own thing. But that's a very scary proposition, until you do it. You're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. Someone else is taking care of all the expenses and the assets and all that stuff. So that's great. Taking on your own thing and starting your own business is a whole different prospect. So quite honestly, while I had toyed around with the idea, it was pretty scary to kind of go out on that limb. But really, the best time to do it was when you really have nothing to lose, and that's kind of what we did. So, I initially thought I was going to be doing this on my own, and then my brother jumped in, and we had other people that were just willing to help, which is great because I didn't have money to pay anybody. So, we were all kind of figuring this out as we move forward. But that's kind of really where we started it. And to be honest, it probably took us a good 2 years to kind of feel like, all right, maybe this will work. Maybe we're, starting to kind of find our stride a little bit, because there's a lot of foundational things that nobody ever thinks of, from building websites and what is your communication and contracts and billing and collection, all that. It's not the fun side of events, but you've got to have that foundation if you're going to be successful and survive in this business. So that took a good, probably 2 years to get that all straightened away.
Yeah. That's fine. I think that there's a lot that I'll ask about, and in terms of the fundamentals of building a business, because you're right, there's so much that's under the hood that people just couldn't possibly imagine. But also, you've been doing this for a while, and you've been through some really challenging periods of time, and you're still doing it, and that says a lot. So I'd be curious, like what I don't want to do is I don't want to have this be a COVID conversation, because I'm really happy that we're past that. But also at the same time, you made it through, and I know that you didn't make it through with no challenges, because that was definitely, not the case. Like Pixilated was decimated. That we're a company today is kind of staggering in a sense, because, we're like bottom of the, we're super niche down, right? We're extra money in the budget, bottom of the funnel. And sure. Even though we have, we make our software and we make our hardware, and we sell it in a few different ways, but like all of those ways got canceled. It just took a few, like some of them were like on a 4-week lag, like first it was like all of the university events, and then it was all of the events. And then it was the people that like own our hardware and they use it, like in their brewery for some kind of photo op, or they use it in their own business, that they were like, oh, we got to pause our subscriptions because like we are not allowed to let customers into our brewery anymore. So that being said, what I would love to just hear a little bit about, because I think there are also businesses that were prepared and they actually handled it with terrific grace and had strategy in place. So what side of that did you guys fall on? Was it a huge knee jerk, or was there enough? Was there a book that was big enough and people that trusted you enough that you were able to kind of like transition?
Well, in the beginning, it was kind of a knee-jerk thing. I pride myself on kind of planning for every situation. What if the power goes out? What if there's a weather? What if there's some type of emergency? I never had on my bingo card a global pandemic. And really, we were shut down for almost 2 years. But looking back, I also think there's some good things that came out of that. because it gave me time to kind of step back and figure out what we wanted to do, to focus on some things that I just never had time for, business and personal related. But I think my view of things changed pretty drastically coming out of that. So, you know, the big word I kept hearing was pivot. Everyone's got to pivot. You got to figure out how to do virtual events or whatever. And I went, okay, maybe that's the answer. And as I looked into it, yeah, I would get phone calls every day from someone else that had a platform or solution or whatever. And I looked at it, and everything I came away with was like, it's good enough. It's okay. If you've got to do something, this is kind of the only game in town. But then I thought, that's never been our company. We've never been a good enough company. So I couldn't find anything that I was going to be very happy to go to a client and say, yes, this is going to be spectacular. If you absolutely have to do something, here it is. But most of those conversations, when we were honest with each other, the same thing could be accomplished through a Zoom call, which really doesn't involve me. If you can't set up a Zoom call, I'll be happy to help you, but you're not coming to an event company to do that. So, you know, we kind of rolled the dice, and do we just do things and try to talk clients into doing them because it's the only game in town? Or do we kind of stick to, because the foundation of our company is bringing people together, and that's really in person. We've always had a virtual aspect of our events, but it was more kind of a window into a live event. We didn't do too many fully virtual platforms. So we really kind of had to do some soul searching as to about what are we about, and does that simply change because the conditions has changed. So we're probably one of the few event companies that is still out there surviving that didn't do virtual events during the pandemic. But like I said, you know, we kind of took a step back. We were always in touch with our clients. What we did find is a lot of that, all those pieces kind of shuffled. There are people that were in key positions that are no longer with companies. You know, there's a lot of people with real estate licenses out there that never had them before, that used to be in events. So all the pieces got kind of moved around. And really, when we came back, it really has been like starting over. But I think we were true to our mission, kind of our mission statement as a company. And I think we were well positioned because of the connections and the conversations we had during that whole period, you know, kind of talking to other event professionals. I was on an advisory board for a major hotel chain, and I was talking with people, not in a public way, but just kind of about, all right, what conditions are you seeing across the country? How are you addressing this? And there were a lot of ideas that were pitched as great ideas at the time that I really didn't want to have anything to do with, to be honest. You know, we talk about COVID testing on site, and I'm like, okay, but that begs the question, what do we do? What's the protocols? What's the procedure of something? So there was a million unanswered questions. So we decided to just kind of take a step back, position ourselves to be, you know, ready to hit the ground running when that door started to open up a little bit. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, you know, I've often like kind of, you know, had the thought that, you know, the way things that opened back up was extremely knee-jerk, right? The whole experience of COVID was just this constant like full gas, full brake, full gas, full brake.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like the doors got flung open, right? And I think that a big part of why we've seen so much of the money in companies that were driven by that big capital infusion that happened around like event and virtual event technology fail was that, and I think we did it too, you know, like we built a virtual tool to, you know, we couldn't keep up with the big software companies. Like we just don't have that kind of budget. But for us, you know, like it was a tool that functioned and it was great. But if anything, it was like PR for us to be able to keep ourselves relevant and continue to reach out to people and stay kind of top of mind. But I think that we, from the jump with our virtual tool, we actually imagined and knew that it was a better tool for the live event space than it was for the virtual event space, because ultimately it was all about you know, like taking a photo booth experience and putting it in a browser and making it accessible by a QR code. And it was something that we had been pitching for years prior to COVID with the vision of being like, oh, for like, Visit Dallas, when they're paying for their 2-page spread in Southwest Magazine, like we could put a QR code in the bottom right, and it could be like a photo contest to win like a flyaway trip to Dallas, right? And you put somebody in like a Cowboys outfit, or you figure out other things about Dallas, and like that's how we had always thought about it. So all during the pandemic, we're imagining this tool as like, this will be its afterlife. Like right now, we're indexing it as like a virtual photo booth, but in the long run, it's going to be a shared photo gallery, and it's going to be this easy way to aggregate photos from a group of people around a specific experience. But I think when push came to shove, when the doors really finally did get flung open, there had been so much, we're open, we're closed, we're open, we're closed, we're open, we're closed, that people were suspicious that things were really open. And then when they were in fact open, there was no time to change all of that marketing and business development collateral and messaging that, like you can't just turn it, right? Like it takes months and months and months to slowly change the topical conversation, so that way the people that are watching your brand understand, okay, like here's this tool, and it kind of started out being relevant to this very specific ecosystem, and now we're blooming it out, and this is how it's going to be relevant forever. And I feel like a lot of us, Pixilated continued, included is the word I'm looking for there, like that was problematic, right? In terms of being able to say, this tool isn't just, sandboxed over here in the virtual world. Like it has relevant things, but all of that is based on education.
Right. And that's the key word there, education, because we actually had to, you don't just flip a switch and events come back on. It takes us a good 3-6 months before, just of planning before we're actually physically at an event. And a lot of what we had to do was kind of prove to our clients that we can go out there, we can do safe events. And that's what we spent a lot of time figuring out. How do we do that? And it was just kind of, let's dip our toe in the water a little bit. And it really depended on what part of the country you're in too, because we saw very different conditions depending on what state. I think our first event back was in which you wouldn't have thought there was even a pandemic going on there. But then, then you go into different cities and it's very different conditions. So that it was kind of a slow ramp up of us kind of proving that, there's not, we can mitigate risks and do events like that. But yeah, you're right. The messaging and marketing and everything, if you had been going in one direction, all of a sudden needed to swing, and they don't necessarily run parallel to each other.
Yeah. So I would imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like obviously I'm making some assumptions, but I would imagine that now is your big, and probably companies that are similar to yours, whether they chose to entertain a virtual portfolio of products during that period of time or not, at this point in time, as things are opening back up, there's this real need to be embracing event technology. One, because the events industry, which typically is a little slow in taking on new technology and new things, they've been warmed so much, right, to being able to be much more open and much more able to kind of perceive opportunities to really grow what they're doing. But that being said, now that has to be integrated into kind of the mischief makers that are there on site and doing it. So I'm curious, how are you seeing event technology change the way that you're needing to do business, or not?
Well, I think right now we're trying to find the balance, because I think event professionals, clients, and attendees are in 3 different areas of event technology. We may be slow, but we also want to know what the cutting edge thing is. And a lot of times, I've gone to all the expos and, here's the 10 things that you got to have this year. And if you had the 10 things from last year, throw them out because they're irrelevant. That doesn't necessarily mean all of my clients are on that same page. So I'm very cautious about saying, here's the latest and greatest, and, we need to use this now. There's a bit of a learning curve. So while we may, you may think we're slow, there's clients out there that are much, much slower. And I also think there's a bit of a hesitancy because we're all sucked into that digital world and virtual world, and kind of forced into it for a while, that what I found is there was really that that need for, the face-to-face interactions and a desire for that. So it's kind of balancing. I see technology as a tool, and it's not a one-size-fits-all tool. There are some great applications, some great moments where it certainly works, but you got to kind of find the balance between those things. And for every situation, I think it's different.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think you're wrong. So I have a question for you, which is, there was a lot of capital flowed into kind of the event technology space over the last, 5 years, give or take. And a lot of that, was building virtual event platforms, and a lot of those feature-wise and fulfillment-wise weren't so different from one another, right? Like there's a lot of iterations of virtual event platforms. I'm curious, what are you maybe wishing there had been more investment in? Is there a gap there from a tool or from a technology standpoint that, because again, like I feel like so much of that capital got driven into just that virtual vision and I think that all of those companies thought to themselves, this is going to continue, it's going to be virtuous.
Right.
And as we start to we'll know as hybrid is coming, and then we can do dev on tools, and we can raise subsequent rounds to expand that offering and make sure that it's this more omni tool. And I don't think that that's necessarily what happened. So, do you see opportunities that, I hate to call them missed opportunities, but opportunities that could have been better realized?
I do. Obviously the technology comes first, and a lot of people programming that, and they're great at what they do, but they're not part of the event world. And then I think we tried to put the square peg in the round hole by bringing in event people, because all of a sudden this opportunity had opened up that really nobody saw coming. And we tried to mash these two worlds together. So you ended up with the floating avatars and the Lego looking jazz band in the corner, and whatever backdrop you wanted. We're partying on the moon, or it just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. You know what I mean? So there's got to be a balance between technology and reality, and the merging of those two worlds. I was never comfortable with kind of like the floating heads and conversations and people coming in and out and muting, and it's just this mishmash of stuff coming together. It was a forced relationship. So I think if we somehow can kind of take a step back and put a little more of, I guess, the human element into technology, and that gets real weird, I know, but I don't like seeing those platforms kind of devoid of that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, it absolutely does. I think, and I had another interview actually earlier today, and our conversation ended up spinning around this similar point, which is it doesn't matter what is available if at the base of whatever is there isn't a genuine interaction with another person, then
Right.
it's almost valueless altogether. It's the same reason why AI is wonderful, but it's only wonderful within the context of something real that's happening. Otherwise, I'm even watching. Something I'm seeing pop up a lot in these photo booth groups is operators wanting to create these AI photo booths, and they're doing it, like they're out there. And when I see them, though, the user can put in a prompt, and I think how hard it is for people to be creative in that flat spotlight of what's a cool prompt to feed into this. But I wouldn't even know what to write, and I've been running a photo booth company. Put me in Malibu with a Mai Tai or whatever. I would come up with the worst, most uninventive command ever. But more so, when you see the output of it, that's not what people want from their event photos, I don't think. It's the same way that, the 360 spinner things or the mirror stuff or all of it, it's all really fun from an experiential perspective. But
Right.
when you talk about the the index of your experience that event, right? Like a photo is it's not so transmutable as people tend to think that it is. Like there's something very specific about a static photo that like a GIF or a video that they don't answer in the same ways. And I think that that's kind of true as well. You know, just you've got to have a real person there
Right.
and know that you're connected to them. And I think that what event technology could and should excel at doing is making it easier to remember and capitalize off of those experiences that you had there, right? Like it should be your caddy that is like all the tools that you need to help you be the best version of yourself in that moment, and then maybe help you follow up with it after the fact, but not help you show up as a different version of who you actually are.
Well, and there's an element out there. I've seen that. I just saw it was a recording of a phone call from a company, and it was an AI salesperson, not a human being, but talking to a human being. And this person didn't know they were talking to it. And you know, it's a marketing thing. They got the sale. It showed how this AI technology can talk to, you know, kind of do the closing. But if it was me on the other end of the line, I would have felt tricked if I knew that, because it sounded like a real conversation. So we have to be real cautious. I go back to the tool thing. These are tools. They can be used for the proper way. But if you have people walking away feeling tricked or not knowing that they were kind of tricked, I think that's a danger we have to be aware of. And we have a unique opportunity in the events world to bring people from all walks of life, to bring people together for a shared experience. I think that's a huge responsibility. And I think anytime, you know, you can, especially today where you can get people together for an incredible moment instead of arguing or bickering or, you know, all the craziness that goes on in the world today. You know, I think that's something that we should be the safeguards of.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you any one bit.
Yeah.
Well, so we're starting to get a little long here, and I want to respect your time, but I do have, if you can indulge me with one more kind of big vision
Sure.
question. Given the change, right? You acknowledged it yourself that when you guys, you know, like opened back up, that there was a ramp up period to even get things going again, but also there's so much reorging, right? There was so much changing that needed to happen. What are some of the changes that feel most profound to you as someone with such a significant depth of experience kind of in the industry that are taking place now? Like, what are those new things that, I think we bonded over like a Nick Borelli AI, like kind of like poking at Nick a little bit. And I think Zenas is great, and I think Nick is great. And I think that he does that kind of stuff as well. But, like, there's always the flashy new thing in the room, right? And a lot of times that like distracts us from like the qualitative or the quantitative stuff that's actually changing things. So what are some things, if any, that you're seeing now that are noteworthy?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm much more cautious than I used to be, I think, because a lot of what I've discovered is when somebody's telling you what they think is best for you, it's usually what is best for them, for you to do. And if they're trying to sell you the future, usually that's what they've got on the shelf for sale. So, I look at that, but there's events is constantly in this flux. There's a lot of things changing, but there's some basic elements that don't. So there are things I never thought I would have to worry about. Active shooter situations, testing on site. There's so many things now that an event planner or production person has to kind of put on their list of things to check off that, weren't there 10, 15 years ago. And there's things are always changing, but we kind of have to figure out how to fit those puzzle pieces in, what makes sense for our clients. And kind of take a step back and not try to be chasing the new shiny thing. And I used to do that when I first started the company. I wanted to connect with everyone and find out what are the trends, what's hot, what's in, what's out, all that stuff. And it's exhausting chasing some of that stuff. I'm not saying don't be aware of that, and I'm not saying that there isn't a place for for everything out there. But I go back to that word balance. We've got to figure out how to kind of balance all these new things with old things. There was someone that I really respect in the events circles who had brought up the idea of maybe not even having printed material at events. And I understand where that comes from an ecological standpoint. But we also need to realize that there's a whole part of the events industry that they rely on printing. So before we shove that out the door at 100%, we need to keep that in mind. And maybe I'm just old fashioned, but sometimes I kind of like something tangible that I can touch, even if it's just a kind of a goofy seminar schedule or pamphlet or flyer or something. So I think we need to balance the future with the present and throw a little bit of the past in there for the, for an even mix.
Yeah, fair enough. Those are great. Those are great points, Shaun. Well, this has been an awesome chat. I'm really glad that we had the chance to connect and kind of, I don't often get to speak to people that have been in the pilot seat for a really long time, and I always find that it's a rich conversation because I've been at it for a while myself, and I know how challenging it can be. And someone that's running their own organization with some longevity and they're responsible for the make or break side of it is, we've got special stories between us that other people in the event world may not have because they could be, working in roles where they're inside of a company doing a different thing. So, Shaun, before we go, why don't you let everyone out there kind of just know, give them one, let them know where to track you down and connect. If it's on LinkedIn, we'll make sure to link to it in the show notes or bio. But like where to connect, a good reason to connect, and anything else that you want to share before we wrap up.
Sure. Well, our website is pierceevents.net. So pierceevents.net. It's got all of our social links on there. So I'm not going to list all the social links. We're on most of those social platforms. We try to kind of mix up the content that we're sharing. Of course, we're on LinkedIn as well. Be happy to connect if you want to see what we're doing or, talk to us, exchange ideas, disagree with something I said. I'm open to all of it. So I appreciate the conversation today, Patrick.
Absolutely. Well, Shaun, on behalf of all of our listeners and myself, thank you so much for making time in your day to come on here and share some of your experiences with us.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
All right, guys, so that brings us to the conclusion of another excellent interview with another event professional. I hope you all enjoyed it. Two requests before we wrap this up. The first is, if you haven't yet, make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to this interview, whether you watched it on YouTube or you're listening through your favorite podcast channel. When you hit subscribe, it ensures that you get notified each time we publish a new episode. And our whole goal is to make sure that you get this content that we're producing. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. And then secondly, if you enjoyed this interview today, or if you've enjoyed previous interviews that you've heard on the Pixilated Podcast, be sure to leave us a quick 5-star review. A few extra words helps it increase the reach that the algorithms will give to your review. Again, our whole goal is to tell the stories of other people in the events ecosystem, so that way we can all benefit from each other's learnings. So that's it. Until next time, this is the Pixilated Podcast, and I am Patrick Rife. Peace.